Part 39. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 383. Especially after seeing Dave Filoni's ability to figure out what kind of galaxy it was just by looking at the starry sky, Jia Yan knew that he was in this strange place, and the help this woman could give him was really great. There are so many that killing them is not an option. So, let her live a little longer. But be careful, whether this woman will continue to plot against you. Jia Yan thought so. Okay, since you can't go back, then tell me how to survive in this place. You have seen it before. This planet seems to have some very powerful native residents. We are not very safe here. Jia Yan saw the woman's mood getting better and couldn't help but add a little more pressure to her. At the same time, it also reminds her that she is nothing more than a burden that can only survive on her own. As expected, Dave Filoni's face changed as she clearly understood the threat in Jia Yan's words. Giant mosquito first, master, she opened her mouth to say something, but the title quickly changed to the master she mentioned before. In this situation, she wanted to live again. If my guess about this place is not wrong, the monsters here, as well as the plants in front of me, did not evolve naturally. If the records I have read remain unchanged, then this place is a place that is caught between several civilizations. This land is probably still a place where several parties are fighting, which means that on this planet, the plants you see now, and the fighting creatures, may all be some civilized life forms. If you want to survive, it's best to find a place to hide. Or join a certain party. But it depends on your identity as an evolved beast. This Ian, it's difficult. All the interstellar civilizations I know of kill evolved beasts. Daphne seemed to have made up her mind and said these words, and then her face relaxed, as if she had revealed what was in her heart. Battlefield? So those monsters we saw before, could they be the life forms of those planets you mentioned? Jia Yan had an expression of disbelief. After all, he thought he had traveled an endless distance. We came to a terrifying place, but this place is still not far away from the so-called interstellar civilizations that Dave Filoni mentioned, and it is even closer. Ian, .23 is not equal to \U003 CS equals \U0026. Rn2P02P0 \U0026, \U003E \U003 CSRPP equals \U0026, OSRP \U0026, \U003ES, \U003 CSRP \U003E \U003C \U003E. Thinking about it, if it is those civilizations that are close to the distance of 20 light years, it is really possible that they have just approached their true territory. Thinking of this, Jia Yan had always felt that the so-called aliens and so-called alien civilizations that were very far away from him seemed to be suddenly very close. Right before your eyes. He seemed to be shocked by this news for a moment, but in the blink of an eye he smiled indifferently in his heart. Even things like being reborn into a mosquito body and traveling through so-called gravitational waves have happened. What else can surprise me? What's more, they're just aliens. Haven't I seen so many already? There's nothing. Worry. Even aliens rely on their strength. I am powerful, so for them, I am not an easy being to deal with. In everything, just keep your heart. Since Daphne said that the only option is to hide, then I will hide. Although I think that my strength is not weak, but in the face of those alien civilizations that can travel among the stars, there is obviously still something that is not enough. And what Daphne doesn't know is that I am hiding in the diaphragm of my wings, and the so-called star mithril is also in my hands. If my body reaches the next mutation threshold, maybe the star mithril will be mine. Powerful mutated raw materials. So, there is still some hope for my future. Even if the so-called space ripples can be opened again, allowing me to return to where I came from. It is not impossible. Thinking of these, Jia Yan finally recovered from the changes in the past few days. With Daifuni's explanation, he finally understood the current situation. And I also have other ideas about the current background. In fact, there are many things that cannot be explained. Jia Yan just selectively ignored these things. For example, the so-called Astro representative Oro. Why was this character able to develop such a terrifying so-called way to open space ripples? Also, why does Daphne's expression look happier now? Jia Yan just figured out the basic ins and outs, and the rest is the next thing. For him, it takes a lot of time to digest the current information. For him now, the trivial things are not it's so easy to deal with it again. First, survive. After that, we have to consider how to return to the Earth on this planet. This was the first time since Big Mosquito was reborn that he had been alone with another life form for such a long time, so he was a little unaccustomed to it and slowly talked to Daifuni at this time. And Daifuni, at this time, also gradually understood the wonderful evolutionary beast of the Big Mosquito. For her, the Big Mosquito changed from the initial one that seemed to be able to be destroyed with a backhand, to an unstoppable one. However, at this time, she discovered that this giant mosquito monster was still the giant mosquito monster she taught to speak using brain waves, but its conversation was completely different from that of a living being that had just learned to speak. The wonders of this monster go far beyond his combat prowess, as well as his IQ and his ability to gain insights, which Daphne found very surprising. However, no matter how smart this master is, he has much less knowledge when he is on an alien planet. It is obvious that he is still a living being from the Earth, and he seems to be half understanding of what I am hiding on some things. Daifuni was thinking about things while dealing with Jia Yan. Now she is just a being with low combat effectiveness, but she knows that the civilization she belongs to, that is, the Empire, is likely to have troops on this planet. If she can contact them, then the current matter and her current predicament will be solved soon. And if she can make this big mosquito captured by the imperial forces of this planet, then her meritorious service will be achieved. Even if she can't catch the big mosquito, she still has another meritorious deed. Even the merit may be even greater. That's Oro's research. The research of this Asta man has been continued during the 300 years that the Earth has been there. Even relying on his slow research, the number of metal monsters has increased to such a terrifying level, but Daphne belongs to being modulated in the solar system, as a life form that is not a normal interstellar civilization. She still cannot understand the extent of Oro's technological strength. But even if she had no common sense about interstellar civilization, Daphne knew how powerful the hidden gravitational waves that Oro had developed were. In fact, more than half a year ago, when the metal monster crisis broke out in Earth exploration. When she knocked Oro out of the Earth, at that time, she had arrived at the research institute where the 2,000-meter building was located. In that case, the 2,000-meter building had not actually been built yet. Daphne, because some means have been used, such as being able to control the Asta signal base, so that the machines guarding the inside of the research institute cannot attack them. So he was able to easily enter the place where the research institute was located. After that, she discovered the research equipment and brief handwriting that Oro could not take away. When she saw the so-called gravitational wave research, as a star civilization modulating creature with certain knowledge, Delphine laughed at that time, mocking that there was something wrong with Oro's head, and a civilization representative who was equivalent to an exile, actually had such delusions. Want to study the role of gravity? She saw that Oro's manual recorded many research records, such as secret cooperation with the so-called German Empire decades ago on Earth to build some unique equipment, some of which are used by humans on Earth today. It seems that it is still extremely shocking. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 384. Oro once used his research to make some human ships disappear in the mysterious triangle area in the ocean, as well as using other secret research to develop their own research materials. Each of these did not destroy human life on a large scale, but they all caused some chaos and urban legend-like things. Oro regards the people on Earth as his research subjects. Daphne and representatives of other civilizations all found it ridiculous that this figure was obsessed with research. A figure who was like an exile actually wanted to study something that could not be studied even in the cutting-edge fields of their civilization. In this way, things like that are like those idiots talking about dreams and overestimating their abilities. But when Daphne saw the so-called gravitational wave sealing equipment sealed by Oro and the related instructions, her expression changed at that time. Daphne doesn't know if this kind of equipment can be activated, and she doesn't know what the effect will be after it is activated. Even Naolo himself doesn't know if the gravitational wave ripple link device he designed. What will happen after it is started? But what happened next? I told Daphne directly with the facts. What kind of result would the activation of that equipment have? That is, if the protection is strong enough. You can ride on the gravitational wave ripples, transfer space, and reach another galaxy in a very short time. Although there are many inconveniences in this, for example, you must have a space ripple area to use this technology. Another thing is that it has a terrifying defense like a giant mosquito. It is not that simple to build. But these are just some minor problems after all. The greatest thing about this device is that it can quickly travel through space. Although it seems that there are still many shortcomings and instability, as long as we continue to study future civilization the speed of traveling in the interstellar space can definitely be greatly improved. And if this research is handed over to the Empire, so the status of Daphne, it can definitely be improved quickly. Thinking of this, the joy in Daphne's eyes flashed away. After all, this was a miracle that she had experienced personally, if it weren't for the big mosquito's body that helped her resist many ripples. Then there is no way she could withstand such an attack, probably like on this planet. Just like the land around the explosion crater where the big mosquito appeared, it must be directly broken down into things that do not even have molecules or atoms. Okay. In fact, I have memorized most of those things in the memory card placed in the leg muscles. As long as I can return to the Empire. After thinking about this, Daphne's eyes lit up with joy. More obvious. I originally thought that I would have to wait on Earth for more than 10 years before I could wait for the exploration ship I was on. When the time comes, I don't know if I can obtain the status of a formal citizen of the Empire by using the intelligence of the stars in the Earth world. But now, she suddenly came to a place that might be closer to the Empire, and even had the key to become an Empire citizen faster. Okay. If that's the case, then I will look for the safest place on this planet tomorrow. If you have any good opinions, you can also tell me. When Jia Yan noticed the strange look in this woman's eyes, he already guessed that she had some plans. Jia Yan couldn't help but smile bitterly. He lost contact with the Earth in an inexplicable place, and his teammates around him were such eccentric guys. How could he survive well? But no matter what, I must live well on this planet. My parents in the Earth world are still waiting for me. Without me, those metal monsters on the Earth will definitely attack humans again. Thinking of his parents and sister, Jia Yan had the courage to live again. Although he did not need to care about the life and death of the entire Earth, he must take good care of his own parents, otherwise he would have such a strong fighting power after practicing. If you can't protect your family, it's the same as not having it. After that, it was a night of silence. Jia Yan did not expect that a night on this planet would be so long. It was almost as long as 3 nights on Earth, which was at least 40 hours. After such a long time, he saw a ray of light appear in the distance in the sky. Daphne seemed to have known the news, so after chatting with Jia Yan for a while at night, she fell asleep again. Her injuries were still very serious, but Jia Yan could see that her self-repair ability, she is also extremely strong. During the night chat, you can see with the naked eye that her complexion is slowly getting better and better. Finally, the faint morning light in front of Jia Yan turned into a bright color. The light he had seen before appeared in front of Jia Yan again. But at this time, Jia Yan was also surprised to find that in another place on the horizon, there seemed to be another dim light on the horizon, appearing on the horizon. It seems to be a sun, but this sun is very weak. If you don't look carefully, this sun will be directly ignored. That's right, Scholz's star is a binary star system composed of two stars. However, the other one is not a real star, but a brown dwarf, commonly known as a failed star. This kind of star is between the size of the parent star and the smallest star. Because it does not have enough energy, it emits it is so bright and brilliant that it is called a brown dwarf, and Scholz's star is a galaxy with normal stars and a brown dwarf. The dim brown dwarf star and the real sun formed a wonderful scene in the sky. This scene seemed to form a strange and otherworldly feeling, making Jia Yan, a big mosquito, full of daydreams. However, this feeling will not last long. After all, mosquitoes have more important things to do on this planet besides looking at the scenery. That is to live well. Jia Yan woke up Daifuni. When the woman woke up, she still looked sleepy, but it seemed that her injuries were much better than the previous night. "I'm a little hungry, can you give me some food first?" said Delphine. Jia Yan was stunned, he was still hungry, but it was better for Daifuni, who was also complaining of hunger at this time. Jia Yan thought that this woman, like him, could go without eating or drinking for a long time, but it didn't seem like that. Jia Yan helplessly watched the woman walk towards the jungle on the side. She had no idea of escape at this time. After all, she herself did not know the basics of this planet, so following the mosquito at this time would undoubtedly be even more dangerous. Safe. What's more, this woman absolutely understood that the big mosquito couldn't really make her escape. If she dares to have this idea, she will definitely die immediately without a burial place. Jia Yan naturally observed this woman closely, and his brainwave power accurately captured that after Daifuni walked into the depths of the forest, he used his brainwave power to remove the strange thing that had been hiding in the tree hole. Creatures killed. Later, Jia Yan was shocked to see the woman take it out and hold it in her hand, then picked up some gray-yellow dead branches and returned here. "Aren't you afraid of poison?" Jia Yan looked at the gray-yellow weasel-like animal carried by the woman, obviously a little surprised. "Don't be afraid, I'm probably very familiar with this creature." Daphne said this ambiguously. There seemed to be no room for Jia Yan to ask questions. She began to familiarly find two dry yellow branches on the ground, just like she had seen on TV, and began the familiar process of drilling wood to make fire. The series of movements was so familiar that Jia Yan didn't even have time to react. In a few seconds, the trees were ablaze with red flames under her high-speed physical energy. After that, the creature was hung up and the barbecue started. "Did you often do these things before?" Jia Yan couldn't help but asked in a deep baritone voice using his brainwave power. "These things are very simple. In a long life of 300 years, there will always be some entertainment." "Haha, master, are you right?" Daifuni raised her head and looked at Jia Yan, her pair of big eyes shining with vitality. His eyes looked a little tired at this time. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Buletin U. Chapter 385. Seeking genuine subscription. Jia Yan shook his head and didn't say anything else. To be honest, even if you add in the life of a human body, Jia Yan only lived less than 30 years. Compared with other people's 300 years of life, it may not even be a fraction. Not on. So he couldn't understand the vicissitudes of this woman's feelings, but Jia Yan himself felt that if he was asked to live alone for 300 years as a guardian on a strange planet, he probably wouldn't be able to bear it. Inexplicably, I have a little respect for this woman. It has nothing to do with killing her or not, I just admire her for being able to live in isolation and loneliness for so long. What Jia Yan and Daifuni don't know is that their whereabouts have attracted great attention among the monsters on this planet. Right at the place where the war with the aircraft occurred, a creature that was larger than its body was ferocious, with a head like an ox's horns but a pair of wings. It was looking at the several frog monsters that he had sent out before. Ho 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 ho, ho ho ho, the leader of the frog monster roared at the huge monster in front of him. They seemed to be communicating, and the sounds they shouted were full of charm, like a language. The leader of the frog monster seemed to be extremely afraid of the horned monster in front of him, and his voice in response was trembling. That's right, you have to know that this horned monster is really overwhelming. Is it scary for a giant mosquito to reach 17 meters? Not really. This horned monster is actually a huge monster more terrifying than a giant mosquito. The length of his body from head to tail is a full 50 meters. The thick front legs alone are as long as the body of a large mosquito. It is simply terrifying. It seems that after hearing the frog monster talk about some information about the big mosquito, the monster's eyes suddenly lit up with a blazing light. Ho ho ho! This monster roared like a mountain and a tsunami, shaking the air in an astonishing way. A shock wave spread in all directions. Those monsters who reported the news. At this moment, he was completely unable to withstand the shock wave, and his head flew away into the distance. On the other hand, the huge horned monster looked at the several frog monsters on the ground that were smashed away by his roar, and his face immediately showed a look of disdain. After this monster suddenly moved towards the nearby place and roared again. Ho 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 ho! Accompanied by this roar, countless responses echoed from the nearby mountains and forests. Then, in the depths of those forests, there were countless strange sounds. Leaving in all directions, the sound is rustling. Direct desire is frightening. Within a moment, all the sounds disappeared, except for the horned monster. Continue to crawl down, it seems that this is the case. It's no longer on his mind. He just looked solemnly, looking at the sky above his head, as if it was above the horizon where the morning light was shining. There might be something that even he needs to be wary of. And around here, those rustling things, apparently after leaving this huge monster, revealed their figures one by one. These monsters are actually monsters that look like mice. It's just that they don't have the long, pointed mouths like earth rats, instead they have short, bear-like mouths. Moreover, their mouths are full of fangs. With their current speed, these monsters are extremely terrifying. Although none of them are more than 2 meters long, many individuals are over 1.56 meters. In other words, they are about the same size as the average Earthling. In a one-on-one situation, even if the Earthlings are armed, they are probably not their opponents. And these rat monsters were running around on the ground one by one, with their nimble noses in the soil, sucking in the fragrance of the earth, and then moved towards the surroundings. It seems like he is searching for something. The horned monster didn't care at all about the actions of these monsters. His own goal was in the distant sky. As for the actions here, on the other side, in a place similar to a huge military camp, a monster with a body of more than 30 meters in length also slightly noticed this scene. This monster is located in a canyon similar to a small plain. There are some strange wooden buildings built here, which look far more civilized than the previous horned monster. The monster here is a completely different form from the monster over there. These monsters all have wings, and their shapes seem to be somewhat similar to those insects on the earth. The 30-meter monster that noticed the movement nearby was even more similar to the terrifying moth on the earth, except that its body was 30 meters long, and it did not have the fine hairs of the earth moth around it, but some looking, then you will know the extremely versatile exoskeleton. In fact, generally speaking, the difference between life forms on Earth and other life forms is not a huge difference. After all, under the influence of the laws of the universe, some things are not the same, but they are also necessarily connected. They may have one pair of wings, or two pairs, or three pairs, and their bodies are not as powerful as simply enlarging the creatures on Earth. This 30-meter terrifying giant moth seemed to have issued some order when it saw the bull-horned monster over there, but it didn't seem to do much, so it continued to retract its sight indifferently, looking like the bull-horned monster. Put it in the sky above your head. They didn't have to wait long. One after another, weird aircraft, with a very strong sense of science fiction, slammed down towards the bottom of the sky. Roar, the bullhorn monster over there let out his own roar almost at the same time. For a time, it can be described as a roaring mountain and a tsunami. It's like the endless sound waves rolling up from the ground. The moth monster here is also emitting a strange power of its own in the surrounding air. If Jia Yan were here, he would definitely be surprised to find that this power is very similar to his own brainwave power. In other words, this should be the power of brainwaves, and even the way of using it is even more clever than Jia Yan's way of using brainwave power. Boom boom boom. The giant insect-like monsters here, under the influence of the brainwave power of this moth creature, all flew into the sky as if they had heard the order. Fight! The scene before Jia Yan and Jia Yan appeared again. Boom boom boom. A terrifying battle that made the earth tremble, accompanied by shock waves that bombarded the surroundings. The aircraft in the sky suffered heavy casualties, and the monsters here were also attacked by various weapons from the aircraft, and their numbers were horribly reduced. But neither side retreated. The battle between the two was simply much more magnificent than the so-called battles that Jia Yan had encountered before. The battle between humans and metal monsters is simply a joke in the face of this level of war. The battle fluctuations in the earth even caused Jia Yan and Dai Funi, who were far away, to be frightened. What's this? Jia Yan saw from a distance that there were streaks of light rising into the sky from a place that was probably hundreds or even 1,000 kilometers away. Then there was the power of some shock waves, like the hurricane that blew up, swaying the entire forest. This is a war, let's go. Even though this place is far away from the center of the war, it is still too dangerous. A battle between star civilizations can easily destroy all life on a planet. If the ultimate method is used, it is to detonate a planet. It's not impossible, so we quickly find a safe place where we can't be affected. Daphne just looked back, then turned pale and screamed. Maybe she was still praying that there would be Imperial troops on this planet before, but seeing such a terrible battle situation, even she didn't want to get close to that planet. This place, that kind of place, is not a dangerous place that a little modulated biochemical person like her can touch. Jia Yan looked behind him. After listening to Dai Funi's description, he, who was already flying, suddenly accelerated. Charge forward. It's not a good place to stay for a long time. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito author, Bulletin U. Chapter 386. Big Mosquito knows that his current combat effectiveness is at most only 1/3 of his usual strength, or maybe even none. So this is not the time to show off, not to mention that even if he had the strength in his heyday, Jia Yan estimated that he would not be able to block some of the powerful attacks from the huge war meat grinder behind him. Is this a battle between interstellar civilizations? It's really terrifying. Jia Yan maintained his flying speed and frequently looked back during the journey. With his eyes, he seemed to be able to see through the distant distance, in the battle scene, powerful life forms similar to himself, fighting against those technological weapons, using his own body. Fighting. Those are the truly powerful beings. Although I can't see them clearly from too far away, I can feel that among them is a huge flying creature wreaking havoc in the sky. Jia Yan thought about the battle scene and the figures that brought destruction to countless civilized combat aircraft, and it seemed that his blood was boiling. This is powerful. Although Jia Yan thinks he is powerful enough, he is completely incomparable to that creature, and there seems to be more than one such creature over there. Powerful. But having goals is what makes me happiest. Jia Yan looked at the scenery behind him, with a very interested and eager look in his eyes. If the body had the strength of its heyday, maybe he would try to step forward and fight. Daifuni did not have Jia Yan's eyesight, so she could only see the powerful explosive airflow coming from behind at this moment. She had no idea that one of the life forms among the warring species that caused the fluctuations in the battle was a hideous and terrifying giant creature. If she sees these life forms, she may have more guesses about the identities of the two warring parties. However, these are all false at this time. If you cannot leave here quickly at this time, then the battle fluctuations in the rear will easily affect this place. It just so happened that Jia Yan's combat power was at its lowest. By then, they might be blown by the strong wind and lose their balance in flight. There is a low place ahead, let's avoid the shock wave there. Jia Yan saw a low boundary not far away, and had no choice but to get into it. This low land is just a land created by two low mountains. If there is anything unique about this place, it is that it has a narrow gap. When Jia Yan saw this gap, he was naturally even happier. Kankan was carrying Daifuni before a strong wind blowing from behind, similar to the explosion of a supergiant nuclear bomb. Got into it? At the same moment when his body got into this gap, the surging explosion shock wave came. It comes from erosion. A few hundred kilometers away, they were actually swept by this incredible hurricane, with countless rubbles flying. Jia Yan has always used his own strength. Use your own flying power to blow others to the point where they cannot stand, but now the hurricane caused by the fighting of others has to be avoided to temporarily avoid the sharp edge. Although Jia Yan is also considering Daifuni's safety in this matter. I couldn't help but slow down, but it wasn't very comfortable to experience such a feeling. Countless gravels splashed around him. Jia Yan saw huge trees. At this time, they were also blown up into the sky by the hurricane caused by the explosion. Some stones even accelerated to speeds above the speed of sound. This made Jia Yan, a powerful mosquito, extremely frightened. You must know that this place is hundreds of kilometers or even 1,000 kilometers away from the center of the battle. However, at such a long distance, the people over there, the battle fluctuations are still transmitted here, which is simply unreasonably powerful. Jia Yan was guessing that even in his heyday, if he reached the center of the battle, he might not be able to survive the battle there. After all, the momentum of the battle was so terrifying. He felt that if his body was at the center of the battle, unless the blue defense continued to show its prowess, it would be impossible for him to survive there with his usual fighting power. Fortunately, the violent shockwave did not last long. Jia Yan saw that the surrounding Gangfeng airflow weakened at an extremely fast speed, so at this time, he directly carried Daifuni and continued flying into the air. Boom boom boom. In this flight, Jia Yan directly accelerated to a speed above the speed of sound. If he could maintain a speed above the speed of sound, even if some shock waves continued to emanate from behind, it would be impossible to catch up with him. But what Jia Yan and the two didn't know was that just 10 minutes after they left the low area where they were hiding. Phew. Phew. Several creatures running around in the earth arrived here at a speed exceeding the speed of sound, flying vertically and horizontally on the ground. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Squeak, 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 squeak. These are 3 adult-sized life forms from Earth. Their appearance is like an enlarged version of a mouse, but compared to the appearance of a mouse, this monster is more terrifying. The sharp claws seem to be able to easily tear a human apart. Crack. After the 3 monsters came here, they sniffed something on the ground. Then they seemed to have discovered something, and they ran forward with bright eyes and ran away. They were running on the ground one by one, but their eyes were staring at the sky, as if they could see something in the empty sky. And those shock waves and strong winds that blew in often rolled their bodies on the ground, but after they rolled, they continued to get up without any other abnormalities and rushed forward. However, these monsters were very surprised to find that their running speed was still not as fast as the life form they were chasing. Instead, they seemed to be moving further and further away. Squeak, 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 squeak. They had no choice but to follow up tirelessly and quickly. This planet is very vast. Although Jia didn't know the exact size of this planet, he had a similar feeling when he looked at the horizon before. On Earth, if you fly to an altitude of several thousand meters, you can already see the curved appearance of the horizon, but on Earth, on this planet, it flew to an altitude of several thousand meters, and the appearance of the horizon in the distance remained unchanged. It seemed that it had to fly higher before it could see the curvature of the horizon. Continue to go south. The place just now should be the agreement war zone. Generally, the planets that two civilizations compete for have certain resources. Outside the war zone, generally in the south, there will be some living development areas. There are generally no affected by the attack. When Daifuni finally saw that Jia Yan was like a headless fly and didn't know where he was going, she couldn't help but speak. Southward. Nanfang Jia Yan understands. If Daifuni is right, then according to her words, Nanfang will judge the same as looking at the sun from the earth, which is the left hand facing the star. Daphne still just stated this conclusion without any idea of explanation. When Jia Yan saw this scene, he could hardly help but curse. This old monster really knows a lot, and it seems that even if she knows the specific information about this planet, it is not impossible. Due to the unequal information, Jia Yan seems to be completely at a disadvantage. But in this situation, he had no choice. When he was on Earth before, Jia Yan took too much initiative. On Earth, he seemed to be on the same home court. After all, as a native of Earth, Jia Yan may have greater advantages than Daifuni, but at this time, on a strange planet, and as a living being without any experience in interstellar travel, the only thing Jia Yan can rely on is this alien representative who has no sense of trust at all. For him, it is also a huge risk, but the other party's life is in his hands, and this is the only thing Jia Yan can take advantage of. So Jia Yan secretly increased the power of his brainwaves a little more, and was ready to destroy the female body riding on his back at any time. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 387. If she does any more tricks, the only option is to kill her. There will be no mercy next time. The two are approaching the south of the planet at a speed that is more than double and nearly twice the speed of sound. Riding on the body of the big mosquito, Daphne kept looking back at her surroundings. Sure enough, it is the same as the records in my books, but compared to what I knew 300 years ago, this planet has changed a lot. That is, in these places, the trees are denser. In fact, these trees are not a real tree, but a half-plant and animal hybrid concocted by some creature. The more scenery Daifuni saw, the more clear the look in her eyes became. Although she is not an aborigine of this planet, and has not even come into contact with any other alien civilizations except life on Earth, she has definitely read enough books in the past 300 years. Although she has a lot of professional knowledge on top, it can't compare to that Austro representative Oro. But because she admired the imperial culture, she had read a lot of information about the so-called empire. She had also read about this planet belonging to the Shoals galaxy. When she read the information about this planet recorded in the aircraft, She almost jumped because the record at that time was that she was in the Empire and the Asta civilization were engaged in a protracted war that lasted for more than 100 years on this planet. The reason for the war was not only because this place was a zone bordering the territories of both sides, but also because there seemed to be some star-condensed minerals here. Although Daphne didn't know how many so-called star-condensed minerals there were, it didn't stop her from reading the information back and forth many times. She even learned a lot about the weapons and equipment of the Empire and the Asta civilization through this, and that was the real reason why she initially regarded Oro, the representative of the Asta civilization, as an enemy. Fortunately, she had the amount of reading at that time, so at this time, Daphne was able to come up with a solution to the dilemma when Jia Yan had no clue. This big mosquito forced me so hard when he was on Earth that he even made me reveal some secrets of the Empire. If I get to the place recorded in the book, I will definitely be able to find the soldiers of the Empire, and then capture them. When Daphne thought of this, another smile flashed across her face, but during this smile, she remembered. He was able to survive because Jia Yan was in the ripples of gravitational waves. Only by using your own body to resist the gravitational ripples can you survive. Thinking of this, the woman was startled. Then he gritted his teeth. At worst, I will beg for mercy on his behalf. If I take out the research on space ripples, it won't be difficult to save the life of an evolved beast, right? Thinking of these, Daphne finally became convinced. For the giant mosquito that rides on. She finally came to a conclusion. The two have a hostile relationship, but they can also be regarded as sympathetic friends. After all, we have experienced so much together. If it weren't for the different statuses, it might be a better choice as friends. Pity. The status of both parties has destined that they cannot become true friends, and can only become enemies and friends under such circumstances. Boom boom boom. The big mosquito is still flying tirelessly. Jia Yan's body was already shaking a bit, and the azure color on his body slowly disappeared after fading for such a long time. And more than that, the feeling of weakness after the explosion became even stronger on his body. Even because there is no energy replenishment, the hungry feeling in the big mosquito's body is even stronger. After I grew bigger before, I got the next mutation very quickly every time, and my body continued to replenish energy, so I didn't think about eating at all. So in the current situation, what should I do? Really, I don't have a good idea. Jia Yan helplessly felt the weakness of his body. This feeling may be the first time since his rebirth that he has experienced such a strong combination of weakness and hunger. Weak because the blue defense has been turned on for so long, and it is fighting against the ripples of gravitational waves? You must know that it is a thing that can directly annihilate matter. Jia Yan can rely on his own body to resist such gravitational waves, which is a miracle in itself. It's already very lucky to just pay a little weakness as the price. Hunger is a normal phenomenon. In fact, Jia Yan has always been hungry. However, since the first mutation appeared, his body energy has gradually become more efficient in utilization, so in the later period, he still appeared able to the horrible period of not needing to eat for several months. But after all, life requires energy consumption, and energy needs to be replenished. After Jia Yan's mutation, he has consumed a lot of energy, so it is normal to have a strong sense of hunger at this time. Under the stimulation of two strong senses, the feeling of fatigue in the big mosquito became even stronger. Just go south, and see if there is any chance of obtaining current energy or food sources. The war fluctuations in the rear slowly disappeared after Jia Yan and the two gradually moved away, and finally they could not be smelled. In the sky and the earth, there is the endless yellow forest at the feet, as well as some hills and the occasional river scenery. One large and one small, flying in this seemingly endless monotonous scenery, without any surprises or special scenery along the way. Gradually, Big Mosquito and Daphne no longer had other thoughts. They just looked at the scenery under their feet and their expressions became numb. Even though both of them had a lot on their minds, they were losing interest in the endless scenery. The monotonous world and endless gray and yellow colors make people's heads turn much slower. Time seems to stand still. However, this situation only lasted for more than 10 hours. Keeping flying at a speed above the speed of sound, the distance that can be covered in more than 10 hours is extremely terrifying. Even on this planet, whose surface area is far larger than that of the Earth, flying at a speed exceeding the speed of sound on the Earth for more than 10 hours is still an extremely long distance. Finally, thousands of meters above the sky, a large stretch of buildings and skyscrapers lay ahead, appearing in the sight of Jia and Daifuni. This is a city. When Jia saw the large-scale city-like building complex, his mosquito head showed a slightly surprised expression. That's right. In a distant land, there seems to be a huge area that is distinct from the surrounding scenery. There, skyscrapers with a height of 300 meters rise one after another, and there are also several representative buildings. It towers into the clouds, and one even pierces directly into the clouds, as if it can be connected to the universe. There were things like flying cars shuttling back and forth, and there were also some life forms flying back and forth in the sky using their own bodies. Such a scenery is simply an incredible science fiction city. Moreover, this place seems to be extremely prosperous, and the scene of the terrifying battle more than 10,000 kilometers away behind is basically two extremes. This. Jia was really stunned. Although Daifuni had said before that there might be a war-free living development zone in the south, he did not expect that on such a desolate and strange planet, there would be such a large-scale science fiction the city appears. But the next moment, Jiayan's thought of surprise was replaced by another thought. This is an alien city. He, Jiayan, actually saw a real civilized city built by aliens at this time, and it was such a developed and technological city. Before, I was still racking my brains on how to avoid the war, but at this moment, I suddenly saw a prosperous big city. This city directly covered an area of several hundred kilometers long and wide. It was like being in this vast desolation. In the planet, appearing in an oasis is fascinating. Beep 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 beep. Just when Jiayan took Daifuni, who was also a little stunned, the two of them were like country people entering the city for the first time, and they were at a loss as they slowly approached this huge science fiction city. A sharp sound rang out. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 388. Happy Lantern Festival. With the sound of this sound, Jiayan only saw a very fast aircraft suddenly appear in front of him and Daifuni. This aircraft is in the shape of a disc, with a length and width of more than 30 meters. It seems to be more advanced than the aircraft driven by Daphne. It plunges into the air and flies towards this place. That piercing alarm came from above. On the top of this aircraft, there is a light-like thing that looks very familiar to Jiayan, which is constantly shining. It looks like a police light. This aircraft seemed to be like a bolt of lightning, coming towards the place where the two were. Not good. Jiayan was flying at a height of about 5,000 meters from the sky, but at this time, he was in extremely poor condition, so faced with the sudden appearance of the aircraft, he was unable to make a quick escape action. In fact, if he were in a complete state, Jiayan felt that with his own strength, there was no need to escape, but now it is impossible to escape, because now he is definitely not as fast as his opponent. It's only my fault that I was shocked when I suddenly saw such a huge city. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been discovered by continuing to get closer. If you can't escape, you can only stay where you are. Jiayan has a surging and vicious look in his heart. If the opponent wants to take action, he can't just surrender. Even if his combat power is greatly reduced, he must show his strength under the opponent's attack. The aircraft was flying in the distance. Jia Yan could clearly see that the appearance of the aircraft seemed to be very familiar to him. This is a flat aircraft, and its appearance is very familiar to Jia Yan. That's right, the aircraft that Jia Yan left on the outer surface of the Earth, and the disc that the Asta people were riding on were basically carved from the same mold. These aircraft must belong to the Oster people. Could it be that the city belongs to the Oster people? Or rather, one of the two sides in the previous war was an Oster people. Thinking of this, Jia Yan felt a little uneasy. After all, he was on Earth. He had a very heated fight with the metal monster from Asta. If the passengers in this aircraft were Asta people, he couldn't guarantee whether they would use special methods. The thing about knowing you are the enemy. The aircraft was far away from Jia Yan and De Funi. About 500 meters away, he slowly stopped. A closer look at what this craft looks like. It is really carved from almost the same mold as the disc seen on the Earth. However, compared to the one swallowed by Jia Yan, this one is a bit larger, and other details have also changed. It seems to be faintly stronger. %%UN ## /U0026 /U0026. Suddenly, a series of sounds came from the opposite side. These sounds were not activated by the power of brain waves, but were released through something similar to a trumpet. It made Jia Yan's heart beat slightly, but he didn't feel much fear. "Can you communicate with them?" Jia Yan suddenly whispered in De Funi's ear, activating his brainwave voice. De Funi had changed when she saw this aircraft before. As Jia Yan saw, this aircraft seemed to her to be an authentic Asta aircraft, and she was talking to an Austrian. The representatives of the Sto civilization had fought for hundreds of years and finally won. But now that they saw the Sto aircraft again, even Daphne's mind was in a trance for a moment. But after hearing Jia Yan's voice, the woman also reacted. She nodded secretly and responded quietly, "You should be able to tell, this is the aircraft of the Asta people, and they speak the Asta language." At the same time, Daphne's voice rang in the air. It was impossible to transmit it easily to 500 meters away with normal generation methods, so she chose the method of generating brainwave power at this time. UN ##. The sound made by De Funi seemed to be somewhat similar to the language in the previous aircraft. Jia Yan understood that this was the Asta language, and De Funi was worthy of being a person who had lived for so many years. She can even speak the enemy's language. The aircraft over there seemed to have really stopped being hostile because of Daphne's Asta language. At this time, an exit suddenly opened on the side of the aircraft. Jia Yan's eyes froze. This was his second real meeting with a living alien. De Funi is just a concocted creature. The alien Jia Yan saw before was the Oro of the Asta people. At that time, the male seemed to be very similar to an Earthling. He didn't know the real Asta. Do people also have the same appearance? The results came quickly. The side door opened on the side of the aircraft, and a female-looking figure appeared. This figure had blonde hair, a high nose, and the overall appearance was actually 70% or 80% similar to an Earthling. The limbs and even the facial features were somewhat similar. Jia Yan did not expect that this Asta man was indeed very similar to the people on Earth. However, this woman's body is slightly taller, and she is as tall as Delphine, reaching about 1.9 meters. It seems that this is an Asta person, who is slightly different from the people on Earth. Such a woman, walking on the streets of the Earth, will attract the attention of others except for her height. Just like a European, there is nothing else that stands out. Even Jia Yan was vaguely doubting whether the people on Earth had anything to do with the Asta civilization. Of course, this is just a guess. The woman stepped out of the air, and air immediately spurted out from the heavy boots she was wearing. Ba, ba, ba. After the airflow was ejected, the woman flew into the air without using any other power. She looked towards Jia Yan and Daphne. Her eyes lingered on Jia Yan's huge body for a long time. She didn't see anything unusual in her expression. She just looked at them indifferently for a while and then made a move, flying towards Jia Yan and others. At this time, Daphne was also a little nervous. For her, this was also the first time she had contact with other aliens except for those alien representatives from Earth, so even Jia Yan could sense it. See her nervousness. %UN hashtag / U0026 / U0026% hashtag. Suddenly, the approaching woman lifted two pistol-like objects from her waist and aimed at Jia Yan and Daphne. He asked us to go down, Daphne said to Jia Yan in Chinese. When Jia Yan heard this, he had no choice but to land downwards. At this time, he didn't have any thoughts of resistance, and it seemed that the other party had no intention of taking action directly. At this time, Jia Yan had crazy thoughts in his heart. He was thinking about these alien lives and the meaning of their actions. They appeared from the city over there, and I guessed it right. The unique lights on the top of their aircraft are very similar to those police cars on Earth. Maybe they are similar things. After all, there are many technologies on Earth. It was all transmitted to the Earth by Oro. Even the security system is somewhat similar, so it is possible. So, this might be something like a police car that maintains law and order. And that woman is an alien woman police. It should be right, two living beings like us are approaching the city. If they are aircraft such as security patrol cars, they will naturally stop them. So, is this just a routine inspection? Jia Yan's analysis reached this point and he immediately came to a conclusion. Perhaps the facts are not too different from his analysis. But there was no relaxation in his heart. After all, Jia Yan's idea all along was not to leave his life and death to others to decide. In the air, a faint brainwave power began to spread. At the same time, Jia Yan followed Daphne's instructions and slowly lowered his body, and then fell towards the ground. His brainwave power is extremely huge. Not only does he suppress Daphne tightly behind his back, but if she makes any move, he will kill her directly. He also extends the tentacles of brainwave power to that place. The air surrounding the Asta woman nearly 200 meters away. Just surrounding it without contact, Jia Yan knew that it had not been discovered. Reborn as an Interstellar Giant Mosquito author, Bulletin U. Chapter 389. During this period, Jia Yan also keenly felt that the brainwave strength of this woman, not to mention compared with his own, even compared with Daphne, was still far behind. If it were Daphne, the brainwave power had reached near her body and had been discovered a long time ago, but this woman didn't seem to feel anything at all. Alien. While Jia Yan was observing these changes, thoughts were flowing through his mind like lightning. However, at this time, he was still declining very quickly. He knew that even if his own strength could kill that woman in an instant, what was terrifying about her was not his own strength. The aircraft behind them was their real strength. The combat power of that aircraft would definitely not be better than that of the one Delphine was riding. The aircraft is weak, maybe even stronger. There must be some people inside at this time, aiming weapons at themselves. Jia Yan couldn't help but feel a shiver in his heart when he thought of the white laser emitted from a disc that he had tried before. Although Daphne, who was riding above Jia Yan, had experienced the current situation for the first time, as a being who was closer to these civilizations, she naturally knew the situation at this time. Unexpectedly, she felt her body tighten at this moment. That big mosquito actually used his brainwave power to tighten his suppression at this time in order to prevent himself from making any small moves. Daphne smiled bitterly. This big mosquito seemed to her to be too vigilant. If she had done something else, or even had something wrong with her tone of voice when communicating with the other person, maybe this big mosquito would kill her, right? But Daphne will naturally not do anything bad, because she knows very well that she and the Asta people in front of her are enemies rather than friends. What's more, she doesn't think that the current giant mosquitoes will definitely be threatened by this aircraft. No one knows the fighting power of the big mosquito better than Delphine. That is an existence that can survive in space gravitational waves? She didn't think so. Such a being, no matter how weak it is, will be suppressed by a mere aircraft. The good thing is, even if the situation is so imminent. However, during the process of the big mosquito's whereabouts, no conflict broke out between the two parties. %UN hashtag. Just after the big mosquito descended to the ground full of gray-yellow vegetation. The woman also wore boots that complemented her flight. When he came to the two of them, he picked up an object and scanned the two of them. Jia Yan was at that moment. He was almost violent enough to hurt someone, but he still had a sparkle in his compound eyes. He refrained from taking action. Defuni explained something to the woman in Asta language that sounded a bit awkward to Jia Yan. And while she was talking, her eyes were moving. Jia Yan knew that what this woman was telling was definitely not the truth. To be honest, that's okay. Jia Yan knew that the relationship between the two of them and the Asta civilization was not so friendly, if the truth was told. In direct exchange, the other party might even take action. But just after the other party said something, Defuni did a magic trick and pulled out a card-like thing from her almost naked clothes and handed it to the woman. It seemed that this card had an effect. After the other party checked it for a while, the woman pointed to a boundary near the huge city without saying anything else, and then took out another card-like thing and handed it over. Delphine. After taking a deep look at Jia Yan, the woman seemed to frown slightly, stepped on her flying boots, and flew into the sky. Jia Yan felt that this woman seemed to be able to find out some details about him, but the other party did not pursue anything at this time. Okay, they're leaving. Looking at the flying aircraft above her head, Daphne let out a long breath. What did you tell them? Jia Yan turned around lightly, staring at the woman's eyes with a pair of compound eyes, the eyes flashing with a fierce luster, which made people feel terrifying. Daphne glanced at the big mosquito, twitching the corners of her mouth slightly, revealing a smile. I didn't say anything. I told her that you are my pet, and a war pet. Otherwise, you will definitely be arrested. Don't be angry, master. Defuni seemed to be smiling but not smiling, which made Jia Yan feel that she deserved a beating. But nothing really broke out at this time. Instead, he asked strangely, what about you? How did you tell them? If they are from Osto, they can't be so friendly to you, right? Jia Yan had heard Defuni say before that her so-called empire and the Osta people's civilization were actually in a relatively hostile relationship. If Defuni had revealed her identity, she would not have been able to get through it so easily before. Right. This is actually very simple. Did you see the card I gave you just now? This card belongs to Oro. It is a thing that proves the identity of the Asta people. She checked it carefully just now, but she couldn't check it. As for what happened, I told her that we had experienced a war before and it was normal for this card to be damaged, so she just urged me to replace it as soon as possible. Then what was the other card she gave you? Jia Yan continued to ask cautiously. Defuni shook her head speechlessly, seeming a little helpless that Jia Yan was so cautious. She raised her arm, pointed at the huge city within sight, and then said, did you see that the city over there is actually divided into two directions? One side is the regular city limits, and there is another smaller city nearby. Do you see anything? The buildings there are all short. It doesn't feel very advanced, right? In their name, it's called the outer city. It's usually a place where unidentified people and poor people live. The woman just now gave me, the unidentified person, a temporary card. Use this card, you can enter that outer city. She also told us to go to the relevant agency as soon as possible to replace it with a normal identity card. Do you know what kind of card this is now? Cautious giant mosquito owner? After hearing this, Jia Yan said angrily, I know. He felt a little awkward in his heart. The feeling of this woman talking to him seemed to have changed a little. Although it sounded friendly before, it was all a pretended feeling. But now, it seemed that she really meant it. Feeling like a friend. I don't think of you, a guy like you who tried to kill me several times, as a friend. After Jia Yan thought about this, he spread his wings again and flew towards the outer city of the huge city that Dafuni mentioned. An alien city, even a so-called outer city where poor people and unknown people gather, is an incredible place. Jia Yan looked at the place over there from a distance. Compared with the huge city ahead, the buildings seemed lower and the planning was more messy, and he suddenly felt a surge of emotion in his heart. When he came to this planet before, he narrowly escaped death and passed through the ripples of gravitational waves. Under such circumstances, Jia Yan did not dare to expect that the next situation would be better, but at this time, the situation was still changing for the better step by step. Wait, no matter it's an alien city or something, I will definitely live well. Then before the exploration ship goes to the Earth, I will return to the Earth and protect the people I value, Jia Yan secretly swore in his heart. This oath is not a real oath. But at this time, faced with the twists and turns that may subvert his life, he is cheering himself up. Step by step, move towards a higher-end situation. Jia Yan not only wants to solve the problem of his weakness in this place, but also wants to find a way to solve the problem of energy. The best thing is to be able to mutate again. If it could mutate again. Jia Yan feels that if he mutates again, he will become even more powerful, and even most of the dangers on this planet may no longer be a huge threat. The big mosquito is looking forward to it. Flying quickly, one large and two small, approached the seemingly chaotic outer city. And not far away, an aircraft flew out, and the woman on it looked at the huge body that still seemed to be visible, with a trace of doubt in her eyes. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito author, Bulletin U. Chapter 390. The recent chapters are all connected, and the subsequent plots are getting better and better. I hope you understand. This woman is indeed an Asta, and she is indeed a peace officer who protects the city. If you look at it from the perspective of an Earthling, she is the so-called policewoman. Although it was only on the ground floor, she had seen too many alien species of all kinds, even those that were larger than this giant mosquito. There shouldn't be anything strange about seeing this huge flying monster like Jia Yan this time. Even though this monster's combat power doesn't seem to be weak, the other party's mistress also said that this is a monster. Just the so-called war pet. The fighting power of a battle pet is so powerful, shouldn't it be surprising, right? What's more, most of the so-called war pets by ordinary people are pets, and they are not the true descendants of those powerful species. But this woman, a police officer, still frowned, vaguely feeling that something was wrong. Of course, what she didn't know was that the so-called battle pet was much more powerful than she had expected. It's not even a battle pet at all, but a powerful evolved beast. What she didn't even know was that before, she was completely enveloped by a brainwave power and almost lost her life. Everyone in the aircraft, including her, had no idea what had happened before. Suddenly, these so-called sheriffs in the aircraft appeared. Everyone's expressions have changed. Like humans on Earth, they have their own emotions. At this time, their expressions changed slightly as they looked at the scenery in front of them. At that place, a few ugly monsters were scurrying not far from the aircraft. They ran past their location and ran quickly towards the city behind them. %UN ###. The female peace officer seems to have certain rights in this aircraft. From his mouth comes the command. The disc aircraft moved instantly. that ground running. They are three monsters with extremely terrifying speeds. They have obviously reached the speed of sound, but they still advance and retreat in an orderly manner and are extremely agile. These monsters are also extremely vigilant. When those aircraft above, when flying down towards them, the three monsters here stopped one by one. Looking at the aircraft slowly descending in the sky, the face with sharp fangs was all grinning. Terrorize the aircraft above. %%% hashtag 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 hashtag. In the aircraft, loud orders were issued. Then the female sheriff. The same medium-sized aircraft appeared. What happened here did not cause the big mosquitoes to leave in the distance. And Daphne's attention. They are all tired. Seeing the distant city at this time, Jia Yan could hardly flap his wings. Thinking that everything is good, as long as you give him a place to rest, that will be enough. Not far away. With Jia Yan's speed, he arrived very quickly. The city in front of us, from a distance, seems to be an extremely huge city. However, when we get closer, we realize that the city is even bigger than what we saw from a distance. To say it is a city, it is better to say that the city seems to be distributed into several areas. Jia Yan and Daifuni followed the direction mentioned by the female sheriff and arrived at a huge area located in the west of the huge city. This area was distinct from several other areas. There seemed to be a huge gap between the two. Distinguish this place from several other areas. However, although there are not that many skyscrapers in this area, its area is also the largest in the entire city. Although it is a so-called slum, in the eyes of Jia Yan and others, compared with the big cities on the earth, this place is not overly generous, and is even more full of science fiction, completely crushing the so-called big cities on the earth. That's right. Jia Yan and Daifuni flew for a moment, then thought about landing below. After all, they had been intercepted by the Asta People's police officers before, which also made them understand that this place was probably a city under the jurisdiction of the Asta people. Both of them had issues with the Asta people. Daifuni is even from the empire and can be said to be a mortal enemy, so she naturally needs to be more careful at this time. When we get there, remember not to fly around. The city's anti-aircraft fire is also on at any time. Daphne pointed in a direction near the outskirts of the city. There, Jia Yan saw a huge building. This building is more than 200 meters high, and its exterior is covered with reflective materials, making it radiant and dazzling. There are also some seemingly various life forms, the total number of which is no less than 100, gathered there. Jia Yan didn't understand what kind of building this place was, let alone its functions. At this time, it is impossible to rule out the possibility that the woman Daifuni is deceiving herself. However, Daifuni seemed to have understood the big mosquito's concerns. She said directly, "Don't think so much. I am a person with no serious status in the city, and I am not as familiar with this place as you are. If you guard me like this in everything, how can we get through the current difficulties together in the future?" Jia Yan did not respond. Also, how could all the troubles between the two in the past be easily eliminated with just a few words? If Jia Yan was such a careless person, he would have died long ago without knowing where he would have come to an alien planet. Daifuni shook her head helplessly, and continued, "Let's do this. I will make 3 arrangements with you. First, during a month when everyone is familiar with this planet, we will not make any calculations. If you can't do it, neither can I know, and my strength is much weaker than yours, not to mention that my self-destruction controller is also with you. If you don't believe me, you can kill me at any time." Jia Yan still had no words. In his heart, he continued to analyze Daifuni's words. Not long after, the building in front was approaching quickly. Daifuni finally waited for Jia Yan's reply. "Okay. But you have to teach me the so-called Asta language within 1 month. It's only 1 month. After more than 1 month, I can return your controller to you. What happens after that is to continue fighting. It's still friendly, that's what it looks like when you see it. Jia Yan's voice rang in Daphne's ears. Daphne smiled slightly, and then responded with a hint of joy. Jia Yan looked at this woman and just sneered. How could he be so naive and think that after a month, the two sides would settle their differences? His idea was just to get more information from this woman in a month. It takes 1 month to learn a language. With Jia Yan's current intelligence, it is not too difficult at all. If it is just some daily expressions, Jia Yan is sure that he can master it in 10 days. After a month, he estimated that he would be able to get enough information from this woman. By then, what other options are there? Of course, kill it. Daphne's face was also full of smiles, but no one knew whether it was a genuine smile or a mask smile. On the ground, looking for books, life forms of different shapes are constantly wandering on the ground. Some monsters seemed to be as huge as Jia Yan's body. One of them had 3 heads, and above its body sat a monster with 8 limbs that looked like charcoal. The body of this monster is different from that of ordinary humans, and there is an air outlet on the back of its body. When breathing, a long smoke-like thing spurts out airflow, which looks very weird. Near this large and small life form, there is another guy who looks like the Tyrannosaurus Rex that dominated the Earth hundreds of millions of years ago. There is a faint smell of sulfur when this thing breathes, and it sprays out from its nostrils. The white smoke is not willing to give in to the charred creatures on the side. In addition to these 2 behemoths, there are also some smaller looking monsters around. Although they are also of all kinds, their combat power seems to be worth mentioning. The other monsters stayed far away from the 2 behemoths, seeming to be very afraid. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 391. Jia Yan looked at the living creatures below, and their shapes made him enjoy looking at them. However, he did not expect that his arrival would also arouse great interest in these monsters. The super-huge mosquito flapped its giant wings and flew downwards. The length of his body is almost the same as that of the Tyrannosaurus Rex, but he has 6 legs that are twice as long as the body. Coupled with the pair of wings, judging from the appearance alone, the arrival of this big mosquito overwhelmed all the monsters present. Moreover, it is also a flying life form. From the scene, no one can fly. Buzz buzz buzz. For a time, various pronunciation methods were constantly making noises on the field here. Suddenly becoming the center of attention, Jia Yan slowly flew down under vigilance. At this time, he could only pray that the city was not what he thought, the kind of city that would suppress him violently when he saw him. If in that case, he is really in danger. However, it seems that there are still a lot of monsters like him in the city, and when Daphne mentioned war pet before, Jia Yan had a guess, that it was the so-called war pet, and it was a new term, but this term is not that difficult to understand. Is it a battle pet? Make it like a game. But with this as a cover, his identity as the so-called evolved beast will not be exposed. In this case, it doesn't matter whether it's a battle pet or a battle beast. What Jia Yan urgently needs now is to understand this planet and the city. The situation that attracts everyone's attention continues, and Jia Yan can feel that the huge monsters over there seem to be exuding an unfriendly atmosphere towards him. This is biological instinct. After all, in nature, can sense the malice of other living beings. That is a basic survival condition. However, after Jia Yan carefully observed these huge monsters, he suddenly felt a sense of understanding in his heart. These monsters are indeed huge. But they only have huge bodies and perhaps real combat power. Maybe it's the standard for normal life forms. In other words, that Tyrannosaurus Rex-like guy is really the same as the Earth hundreds of millions of years ago. It's as powerful as a Tyrannosaurus rex, so it's not impossible to be even stronger. But it's not so powerful that it violates the laws of biology. The other life forms also look the same. Jia Yan suddenly understood. Maybe those things that look stupid and not intelligent. It's the so-called battle pet. It is estimated that when Daifuni translated the previous noun, there were some subjective translation differences, so Jia Yan was at this time. It was only when I saw these monsters that I finally had some understanding of the so-called war pets. Call me such a horny person? Jia Yan looked at the so-called war pets dumbfounded. These monsters looked extremely powerful and looked very good. Especially that Tyrannosaurus rex-like guy, he was covered in black flesh with protruding veins, as if he could make mountains roar and tsunamis with just a single movement. It was amazing. However, the problem is, they are really just regular powerful ones. Jia Yan is a creature that has undergone so many mutations and swallowed countless mysterious substances from the outside world. Compared with these conventional life forms, even if they are already powerful and terrifying monsters in their own body size, in front of Jia Yan, they are just like children. If they fight, there will be no chance of anything. The backhand power. Perhaps only human firearms can kill these monsters, but Jia Yan? Even without using his azure defense, most weapons of the people on Earth cannot harm him even a hair. So after seeing these monsters, Jia Yan simply ignored them. Not to mention in terms of IQ, he crushed them. Even in terms of combat power, he also outclassed these monsters. Ho ho ho. The huge Tyrannosaurus rex, seeing Jia Yan's landing, was startled for a moment, and then roared as if it was a huge threat. Jia Yan's compound eyes flashed with a strange look, and he suddenly turned his head and stared at this Tyrannosaurus rex-like guy. After that, the Tyrannosaurus rex seemed to be fixed by a stereotyping technique. After all, there is a huge difference in the level of power between evolved beasts and ordinary life forms. If Jia Yan didn't want to make more eye-catching performances at this time, with just one claw, this huge monster that he met for the first time could die at his feet. It turns out that alien creatures are not all powerful. While Jia Yan was thinking about this, he moved his feet and walked towards the building in front of him. Daifuni had already sent a message to him before that they were going to this building to conduct the so-called identity verification and login. When passing in front of the Tyrannosaurus rex creature, the guy who was about the same length as Jia Yan, even 10 meters tall when standing, and the same height as Jia Yan, who walked on 6 legs, actually trembled and then crawled. Come down. Ouch, ouch, ouch. This guy actually roared like a puppy. So cute. Jia Yan almost laughed in his heart. Such a creature is really not worth mentioning. Buzz buzz. The surrounding life forms seemed to start whispering again when they saw this scene, but Jia Yan couldn't tell which of these monsters were intelligent beings and which ones were without intelligence. In short, when he saw that after the Tyrannosaurus rex all crawled down, they walked forward again. When passing by the 3 monsters, the monster also crawled down in fear. The charcoal-like life sitting on the head of the 3-headed monster had a very human expression. He seemed to have a look of surprise. He looked at Jia Yan deeply for a few times, and then allowed his pet to be humble. The head looked lifeless. Daifuni was still riding on Jia Yan's back, and the 2 of them walked forward and entered the building hall. The first floor of this hall is extremely high, almost 100 meters high, which is a terrifying height. In other words, there may be an extremely large number of guests here. Otherwise, there is no need to build such a tall floor. Jia Yan entered this hall, his compound eyes sparkling, and he kept looking around. %%% backslash U0026 backslash U0026 backslash U0026. Entering the hall, several creatures that looked similar to humans on Earth came forward. One of them looked like a woman, with her lips opened, and she uttered a series of weird syllables. Jia Yan discovered that not knowing the language is really a huge trouble. If he could understand the words here, there would be no need for Daphne to do this. Even during this period, he couldn't understand what Delphine said, so he was frightened, fearing that this woman who had been plotting against him would collude with others to plot against him again. I hope you don't do anything stupid. Jia Yan quietly radiated the power of his brain waves. This power spread to the neck of the red-haired woman on his back, and it seemed that he could break her head with a gentle squeeze. Feeling the changes on her neck, Daphne's face changed slightly. She is riding on the body of a big mosquito, and this flying monster has shown that it can easily suppress the powerful battle pets outside. The intelligent beings behind are all envious. She has such a powerful battle pet, but who you know, she is actually just a being coerced by this monster. Daphne smiled helplessly, and then opened her Li Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 392. Big Mosquito stood in the lobby of this extremely tall building. The decoration on the ceiling above his head was completely different from the style on Earth. This place is so vast that he can spread his wings and fly in the hall, but there are only less than 20 or 30 staff members. Because there are not many people, the weird life forms outside are all lining up one by one. Behind those staff members make arrangements to carry out some certification work. The big mosquito realized that he had just made an unqualified move, that is, jumping in line. Moreover, those life forms dare not speak out in anger. Soon, the female-like creature who was talking to Daphne led Jia Yan forward and arrived at a huge window. There was a man inside this window. When he saw him for the first time, Jia Yan's expression changed. This man's brainwave power was very powerful. In an instant, he sensed that this guy's brainwave power was no longer as powerful as Daphne's in her full state, and might even be twice as powerful. He quickly put down the brainwave power that was tied to Daphne's neck, because it was likely to be noticed by the other party. Jia Yan can now play a battle pet. Let's not talk about whether the battle pet may have brainwave power. Even if it is possible, a discerning person can see that there is something wrong with the brainwave power being tied to the neck of the master. Nothing unexpected happened after that. Jia Yan was here, listening to Daphne's conversation with the man, and it seemed that after a simple verification, he got something like a business card again. The two of them did not stay any longer. At Daphne's signal, Jia Yan stepped out of the building, seemingly slowly, but actually a little faster. What did you say before? Just after walking a certain distance, Jia Yan's murderous words reached Daphne's ears. Oh! My master, you know, this is not popular with girls. Daphne heard Jia Yan's cautious words again. A long sigh. It seems that even the big mosquitoes are not mentioned. She also wants to teach Jia Yanasta human language, otherwise she will be driven crazy if this continues. After explaining it, it was nothing more than some verification. Daphne made up some excuses at random and deceived the man. And actually, in this area of the outer city, there are many people of unknown origin, who are just the management here. Turn a blind eye to these people, after all this is just a planet at war. If there are so many controls, where will anyone be willing to come and work? The situation is not what I guessed before. This planet has passed hundreds of years. It has changed a long time ago, but now is not the time to talk about this. What we have to do now is to find a place and settle down in the city first. Let's talk about it. Daphne was telling Jia Yan about the current situation. That face is not very good looking. When she was observing the left and right, she slowly got information about the current situation of this planet from others, but the situation was completely different from what she expected. But at the moment, she still didn't say anything to Big Mosquito, because that would happen later. It is not that easy to find a place that can accommodate large mosquitoes in the city. Now they can only look for it slowly. And just when they finished doing this and successfully obtained a satisfactory identity, on the outskirts of the city not far away, several monsters that looked like enlarged versions of rats from the Earth were expelled by the law enforcement aircraft. At this time, one by one, they headed towards the bushes and left unwillingly. And the tense atmosphere in the aircraft was relieved. %%UN hashtag #U0026 /U0026 /U0026, a man made a worried comment at this time. His words were agreed by several other people, but at this time, the female sheriff just rubbed her temples helplessly and said some words to comfort her subordinates. But where this group of people didn't see it, those rat-like monsters flashed with light. After one of them squeaked, the other two followed behind it, quietly moving forward through the jungle. The sound rushed away. Their destination is clearly the huge city that appears to be looming under the gray-yellow sunlight. Naturally, Jia Yan and the two of them didn't know that after they left the fighting place, there were several strange, rat-like life forms that actually pursued them. Now that they have a temporary identity, they can finally have some time to relax here. Click. Click, click, click. Wandering on the streets of this outer city, the slender 6 legs of the big mosquito lightly stepped on the ground. Obviously, the ground here has been specially processed. Otherwise, a creature like Jia Yan could easily trample the entire ground. There were some alien beings around who saw the huge size of the mosquito, and they were all dumbfounded. It seemed that they were extremely rare for such a huge creature. However, Jia Yan and Daifuni didn't pay much attention to these pointing fingers. After all, Jia Yan was a giant mosquito. The Earth has long been accustomed to the colored looks of others, and Delphini is an alien representative who has lived on the Earth for so long. If she can't bear these looks at this time, how can she be an alien civilization on the Earth? The representative of the Communist Party of China has almost the entire human race on Earth under his control. But while those alien beings were secretly watching the two of them, Jia Yan and the two were also looking at the city. The architectural style here is completely different from that on the other side of the Earth. Most of them are more sci-fi. However, this is not intentional by the aliens, but is the result of the technology itself. Those buildings are rising one after another, some reaching a height of 700 or 800 meters. People are coming and going among them. It can be said that such a building is like a small city. There are some small aircraft flying in the sky. Most of these aircraft are similar to cars on Earth. They have something like sound waves at their tails, and they constantly spray out a little airflow that distorts the air, but their main driving force is to move forward. Not relying on these airflows at all, but relying on a reaction power system whose principles Jia Yan does not understand at all. There are still only a few tens of meters of aircraft similar to the security vehicle, and this city has not reached the level that Jia Yan imagined for an advanced alien civilization. The same goes for the aliens. Some of them just look very lost. Because this place is a so-called slum area, there are still many aliens who look like they live in a poor life. Among the aliens here, most are the Asta people who look like earthlings, and the other part are like some weird beasts. Their appearance looks very different from Jia Yan. Among those monsters, Jia Yan even saw a life form similar to the frog monster he saw before. However, the frog-like life form did not appear to be so primitive at this time. Instead, it was dressed in straight clothes and looked stylish. In addition, it also spoke a language that was very similar to what Delphine said. Neither of them knew the detailed information about this place, so they were as she walked. Daifuni told Jia Yan everything she knew. Slowly, Jia Yan understood that there seemed to be not many forces of her empire existing on this planet. Whether this was due to defeat or something else was unknown. As expected, the main builders of the city were Osto people. The other force that was fighting with it naturally agreed, so such a city appeared on this planet. As for the two sides in the war, one is the army of the Asta civilization, and the other is a joint army known as the Biochemical Tribe and the Zerg Tribe. When Daphne talked about these two races, she looked a little confused, because she didn't get any information about these two civilizations from the information she knew. However, looking at the previous battles and the few words that Daphne talked about the biochemical race and the Zerg through others, Daphne also made an analysis. The power of these two races may not be weaker than the Asta civilization. The two coalition forces have been fighting a war with the Asta people for more than 200 years. It turns out that Daphne also has something she doesn't know.